Okay, so we'll get started, and there may be some folks coming in late. I hope so. This is terrific. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Emily, and I'm going to moderate this SERFA session today. Our SERFA sessions are a monthly Zoom meeting, and we strive to bring together folks in the folk music community from the Southeast region, and we're trying to build community, get to know new folks, and maybe learn something new today. So we are just honored to have our three panelists for today's discussion, Rachel Eddy, Waverly Leonard, Rachel Dunaway. So thanks y'all for being with us. Before we get started, I'll give a just quick little Zoom info in case anybody is new to Zoom. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you've got a little chat window. And so we can use that chat to communicate, to ask questions from the panelists. If you would like to do that, or to respond to things, feel free to chime in the chat anytime. To get things started, I thought we might just introduce ourselves to each other in the chat, maybe put where you're from. And I have a question. How would you describe your musical life today? What's your musical life like right now? Which might be different from your musical life a year and a half ago. So if you want to just say hello and introduce yourselves, I'll give you a minute to do that. And another FYI while you're thinking and typing, if you go up to the right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, if you're on a computer, you should be able to change the view. So from there, you're able to either choose to look at the gallery, which is everybody, if you want to see folks reacting, or if you just want to see the person who's speaking, which is sometimes a helpful way to concentrate, you can just choose speaker view, and then Zoom will automatically move between people, whoever's making noise. So when we're not speaking or asking a question, I would ask that you mute your microphone just to keep the focus is really helpful. And if you want to be on or off video, that's totally up to you. We'll have a real conversation today, so please feel free to ask questions of the panelists, and please feel free to chime in and give your thoughts. I'm looking at the introductions here. Hi, Burke. Oh, wow. Hi, Karen. Kate. Kelsey, hi. Cool. Touring again in 2022. Hi, Lindsay. Kinda learning. Awesome. Well, feel free to keep on putting those in the chat, and welcome. So we'll just get things started here. I'm going to turn to the panelists. Oh, I wanted to introduce everybody real quickly. So I'll one at a time introduce the panelists, and I'll give a little introduction as the host, and then I'll ask each of our panelists if they can answer the same question. What's your musical life like today? So I'll start with Waverly, who is a fiddle player and a singer. She's from North Carolina, and she's part of a new musical project with Courtney Clapp called the Carolina Songbirds. Waverly is a UNC Chapel Hill graduate, and she is currently at NC State in a master's program headed for medical school. So welcome, Waverly. How would you describe your musical life today?
Hey everybody, it's so good to be here. So Emily touched on this a little bit, but the most exciting part of my post-vaccine life has been getting together with my friend Courtney and playing old time tunes. And we decided to form a band together because we were just having so much fun. And we've been playing together pretty consistently since about June. We have some gigs, mostly outdoor stuff. We just played at IBMA, which was really fun. And that's just been really rewarding. I've never really had my own project before. I sat in with a lot of bands, and so it's really cool to get to do a lot of duet work, working on harmony singing, stuff like that. So yeah, that takes up most of my time. I also am like in the house band at this like North Carolina triangle thing called Beer and Banjos. So that's fun, getting to play some bluegrass. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm up to nowadays.
Awesome. I couldn't tell if I was muted there. Awesome. Welcome, Waverly. Let's see. Rachel Dunaway is a banjo player, an old-time banjo player from Richmond, Virginia, currently a senior at Warren Wilson College, studying traditional music, and gives private clawhammer banjo lessons. And I love this in your bio, Rachel. It says, when not playing music, she enjoys working with children, animals, and doing different types of crafts. Welcome. Will you tell us a little bit about your musical life right now?
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I'm, like you said, I'm a senior at Warren Wilson right now. So I'm doing a traditional music major, taking a bunch of music classes. I've been playing in a band with Phil Jameson and several other students my entire time here, which is super fun. I've been taking banjo lessons with Travis Stewart, which is wonderful. And then when I'm back home, I play with a band called the Hot Seats a lot, and just enjoy jamming as much as possible.
Awesome. Welcome, Rachel. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks. And Rachel Eddy, last but not least, a West Virginia native, now based in Washington, D.C., a fiddle, banjo, guitar, and mandolin player, a fantastic teacher, and they play for dances and jam sessions, and just released a project during the pandemic called Old Time Sweethearts, which was a compilation of housebound couples. Was it not? Will you tell us a little bit about your musical life right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me too. This is a real treat to see folks, and it's actually I've been doing lots of Zoom lessons as part of my life these days, but I haven't done a Zoom session where there have been a lot of folks, so it just feels good to be around a crowd of people more than one, albeit still very two-dimensional. My music life right now has been definitely impacted by largely coming off the road, but I've been very fortunate to pivot and teach lessons, and I have gathered a nice crew of students kind of around the world, and I really enjoyed reaching out from my home where I've spent most of the last 18 months, and being able to help folks with their music also stuck in their homes for months and months. So that's been pretty rewarding to be teaching online, and gigs are returning slowly, and I'm really grateful and like super privileged I play music, guitar with Jake Blunt, and guitar and fiddle with Brad Kolodner and his dad Ken, and the Kolodner Quartet. So I have a couple different gigs that I do, and people that I get to see occasionally now. And I just said before we started the session, I last weekend played for the first square dance since the pandemic started, and that was really exciting. So little bit by little bit, I think it's starting to expand beyond the Zoom world, and I'm excited about that.
Me too. Well, so welcome, Rachel. So I thought that I would start out the session by just letting, for the folks that are new to what we're talking about, especially like old time jamming and so forth. I thought we'd do just like a quick, brief crash course in what are we talking about for anybody who doesn't know. So I'll turn it over to the panelists and let you all kind of weigh in. How would you describe to a person who is perhaps a musician, but not an old-time musician, perhaps a singer-songwriter, perhaps a music lover who wants to branch out into different parts of their community? How would you describe old-time music and the settings in which you participate?
Okay, I'll go first. I was waiting. I was just playing a little chicken to see if you guys would unmute first. I've always played old time music since I was a kid. My dad plays fiddle and guitar, and to me, it's sort of like a reunion of friends every time, whether they be new friends or old friends. And I think that sense of community is created when an old time session gathers the chairs and sit down in a circle. And whether that's a tight knit knee to knee circle or one of those big old, like you have to, put the can on the strings to hear the other side of it circle, I think typically it's very inclusive. I found old time music to be a very inclusive community in terms of like, hey, you play fiddle, come on over here and join. So musically, kind of the experience that I enjoy about it is a fiddle tune, like, takes maybe a minute or less to play through it. You don't have to know it. Someone has to know it, but everyone doesn't have to know it. And if the leader plays it a few times, people kind of get onto it. And then suddenly, like, it sounds like a palatable piece of music, but you keep playing it. And 4 or 5 minutes later, it really starts sounding good. And then there's this sort of like group connection in the music as everybody sort of, like embraces the piece of music that was chosen. And after, you all have a lot of fun with it, someone kicks out their foot and ends it. And you have 5 minutes of conversation and then another 10 minutes of a tune that is new and fresh while familiar all at the same time. And I just enjoy that aspect of the music. Somebody else?
Yeah, I definitely agree that old time music is very much a community, the community of old time musicians and fans. And I think, like, you go to any sort of camp or old time camp or a jam session, like, I definitely agree with Rachel. It's very inclusive. People, if you're standing on the side with an instrument, most of the time people will invite you in. If you go to a festival, the same thing. And it's definitely very much based on community. I'd guess that a lot more people play old time music casually, like just as a fun thing, and they go to jams and things, rather than the people who will go out and actually perform. And so I think a big part of the old time music community is just social. It's very social, a very social style of music.
I am probably the newest to old time out of the three of us. I started playing old time in college. I had visited Ireland and I loved their like jam culture. And I realized that we had something similar here in North Carolina. And kind of what Rachel was talking about earlier was like, I love that trance-like element that you can find in old time once you've been playing a tune for a couple of minutes. It's just this really strong sense of connection and drive and rhythm. And I think that's one thing that's really special about old time specifically. It's all about that groove and the rhythm and the group connection. Whereas in bluegrass, it's which I also love, it's more about like the soloistic nature. So yeah, and just to kind of touch on like the elements of what makes music old time, a lot of the time they're very old tunes, fiddle tunes. The fiddle or the banjo is usually the primary instrument. A lot of the time the guitarist just plays backup. There's usually a bass. Mandolin can also play the lead. Sometimes people will sing, but a lot of the time it's just instrumental music. And that can make it a little bit difficult if you are trying to get into old time. Like when I first went to a festival, I was so overwhelmed because I only knew like 5 tunes. And like all of the jams I would go to, people were playing like just all this cool stuff. I didn't have the capacity to learn on the fly, and it can be overwhelming. But like both Rachel said, it's a very inclusive community. So even though I didn't really know that much, it still made me fun. And that's one really special aspect of it.
Mark, I wanted to acknowledge in the chat was saying, Mark Smith said, after bluegrass concerts, there are always jam sessions, which is a difference from a folk concert where, in his experience, people go home after the concert, which I think is a really 2 good points. One is that, jamming is not necessarily unique to old time music, in that you could have there are lots of bluegrass jams. Tom in the chat is saying that that he has community sing-alongs with the Rise Up Singing books, which I love that, Tom. And that's sort of the same idea. It's like we're all find ourselves together and can make music with a common repertoire, or are able to sort of learn together. So Waverly, you mentioned that that you were new or newer maybe than the Rachels. I like that. That you were sort of a relative newcomer to old time music. So I'm wondering from you and from any of the other panelists, is there a mentor or a teacher or somebody who sort of said, you're welcome here, and kind of helped you find confidence? And do you find yourself also wanting to do that for other musicians who might be in the same place?
Yeah, definitely. One of my first mentors was Nate Leith, the fiddle player. He was like so crucial for me to meet all of the people who I am now really good friends with, and he just was always really encouraging. I came from school music background, and I had no sense of groove. So yeah, he was really helpful and welcoming. And then I took lessons with Tatiana Hargraves for about a year at UNC Chapel Hill, where she teaches now, and she's also been an incredible mentor. So yeah, I definitely want to help pass that along whenever I can and show people that they're welcome in this community.
Yeah, I also definitely had I first got into old time music. My 8th grade science teacher brought in his banjo to play for us one day, and I had been playing classical viola for a while, but had gotten kind of bored with it. So I was thinking about learning another instrument, and he brought in his banjo to play just as a fun thing. And I was like, that's super cool. Will you teach me how to do that? And he said, yes. And so his name's Josh Behrman, and he plays with the band The Hot Seats, which I play with a lot now. And I took lessons from him all through high school. And now I still take lessons with him when I'm home. And then here at school, I've been taking lessons and playing a lot with Travis Stewart, who's also been a good mentor of mine and has definitely expanded my my skill set in terms of playing styles and learning styles. And I think you mentioned earlier, I give lessons, and that's one of my favorite things about giving lessons, is especially when a student gets really excited about it. They just kind of want to dive in and get more into the community, and I always try to encourage them to go to jams and learn tunes and get involved in the community aspects of it as well.
Yeah, the community is just it's so big, and I'm sitting here thinking, what am I going to say when it is my turn to talk about my mentors? I've had so many, both older and younger than me, and it's one of the things about the community that I quite love is it is a very broad spectrum of age and degree of people from all over and all different kinds of lives. And I think that sort of wide brushstroke of people in and of itself is inspiring to me, that we all find this common thread, right? But I guess the answer to my who has been a mentor specifically on a larger scale, the Augusta Heritage Center is like a fiddle camp, an old time music camp in West Virginia, which is actually where I met Rachel Dunaway the first time. And I've hung out there many times playing tunes late at night on a beautiful porch in the mountains of West Virginia. I would say that place has been my biggest mentor, and many individual mentors have come out of it. I certainly found my initial spark to want to be part of the community and be a musician for the rest of my life at a young age of 14 by going to Augusta and having the experience of, first of all, realizing that other people played this music, because I didn't know it was actually a larger thing because I just grew up playing it. So I just knew the people that were sort of near me, near my family, and realizing that this community is much, much broader, and having people say to me as a very impressionable teenager, right? Like, hey, you, come on over here. You're one of us. You're welcome here and sit in this jam. Or like the time I was sitting next to Joe Newberry playing guitar and he reaches over and grabs a leg of my chair and pulls it right up next to him. I just like, you know, those kind of, the camps provide those kind of places where mentorships happen. And I've been real fortunate to be able to teach at Augusta and other various camps, and perhaps be a mentor to some at this point in my career. But I would say that's been my initial sort of very important mentorship, are those teaching environments where the community is very present and there to like learn and meet people.
Yeah, I'll give a shout out. Oops, sorry. I'll give a shout out to Augusta as well. Like that's where I first met Rachel. That's where I think I went my first year after I'd been playing for about a year and a half. And for me also, it was kind of things like, oh my gosh, like so many other people play this music. And because Richmond is great, there's somewhat of an old time scene there, but it's not a huge thing there. So I played at like maybe one jam, and going somewhere where there was an entire week full of just being surrounded by people who play and love old time music was pretty life changing. And I love Augusta a lot, and I've gone back every summer since. It's wonderful.
I just want to add, Rachel, that I have seen you there every summer that you've gone and watched your musical journey and watched you get better and better and better. And I just think it's awesome. And I'm looking forward to maybe having that opportunity next summer at Augusta.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely hoping for next summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, pointing out the Richmond Dunaways are weighing in the chat to give love to you, Rachel Dunaway, and admire. And I think that's a neat thing too, is that, you know, I hear from all three of the panelists, I'm hearing you talk about names of friends, names of mentors, names of people that you are excited to make music with. And I know that we're all excited that you individually are here. And yet there's something about old time music that is, even though someone can be an individual musician with their own sound, their own style, their own sort of something that we're excited about, it really, the focus I think is balanced on the community as opposed to the sort of star quality of the performer. Would you agree with that? Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, this is something I was just thinking about while the other two panelists were talking, because like I mentioned, I came from a classical violin background, and I think one of the elements that was so appealing once I did find old time was that it was very inclusive and welcoming, whereas with classical music, it's more about your own musical journey. Even in the orchestra, you're just kind of subject to the whims of the conductor. And you don't really have a ton of musical freedom. Like even when you're working on a concerto, you are interpreting someone else's work. And there's also a very competitive spirit to it. I was lucky in that like my violin studio in college was pretty warm and friendly, but you couldn't really play music together. You just performed for each other. And that was so sad to me, that you had all these incredibly talented people who couldn't really make music together. So that was one thing I really loved once I did come over to the dark side.
Lindsay Terrell, did you have your hand up? Just calling. If you have a question, just holler it out. And if anybody else does also, please do. So Waverly, you just mentioned something about competitiveness in some musical worlds, of feeling like there's only space for one, or there's not room for everybody, or that we're that the spirit of participation is maybe different than it is in old time music, which we're talking about. But there are contests in traditional music. Do any of you panelists ever play in or judge contests? And do you want to? I'm going to pause that question. I'll ask again. Mark has a hand up. Mark, do you want to ask?
I just put a comment in the chat about the difference between the old songs and Appalachian and old time music, and they all tend to blend to me. I can't really see where they start and stop.
That's a terrific question. Anybody want to take that one on? So to reiterate what I think Mark is asking, there are a lot of music. There is a lot of music that comes out of what we would call like maybe the repertoire of traditional music that includes ballads, folk songs, old like dancing circle game songs, and old time music, and all kinds of things that sort of like fit into those categories that sometimes I think we use interchangeable nomenclature for. So does anybody want to like give any kind of specifics, like how is old time music different from, say, a ballad singer, or is it different?
I'm going to venture to say it's sort of one and the same, right? It is just, it all falls under the umbrella of traditional music. But it's true, you don't see a lot of ballad singing in a fiddle tune jam. Occasionally it does happen. And I always welcome that random, like if someone can rip out a ballad and they just want to like put it there, I'm happy to just sit with my fiddle in my lap and listen to that. Now, if they want to do Freebird, I might have a problem, like there is a line. But I was thinking on the point, pushing it the other direction and having bluegrass music and old time music combined. And I think it also, again, is sort of under this traditional umbrella. And I do think there's a place branching out from many directions in old time music where it overlaps with other forms of traditional music. And I've been in situations where I've been playing with musicians that are very true and pure to the thing we're doing. And I'm happy to participate in the music that way. But I've also been in many situations where people are like, oh, let's do this bluegrass song and play it old timey. Or I'll sit in a bluegrass jam and I'll play old timey. And I think there's really a nice space to overlap within traditional music in all sorts of directions.
Anybody, Rachel Dunaway or Waverly, want to speak to that? Mark, do you still have your hand up because you want to ask more?
No, I'll put it down.
Oh, okay. It's fine if it stays up. Rachel Dunaway, do you have thoughts on the boundaries between traditional musics, or between what we might call folk music or Appalachian music and old time specifically?
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with what other Rachel said. I think it also kind of depends on the jam. Like if you go somewhere, I don't know, as a banjo player, if someone comes up and wants to play a tune in A flat, I might have to sit that one out. Yeah, Rachel said no. Yeah. So it depends if it's something that's easily accessible to the rest of the jam, like, because as a banjo player, we basically have to retune for every key. If it's something that's in C, G, D, or A, I can easily figure that out and play some chords along with it, if nothing else. But if someone comes along and wants to play in like E flat or A flat or some weird key that's not super common, that can be a little bit more difficult and can be a little bit of a jam buster in terms of getting everyone to play along.
Waverly Burke had a question about mixing things like old time music and jazz, and you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot at a lot of festivals. A lot of the people I hang out with really like to play swing. And then I've noticed this really interesting trend of like a lot of the fantastic old time musicians who go to Berkeley come back to the festival next year playing like Django Reinhardt. And it actually works really well. I think it you don't see people singing as much, which I don't think that's for any particular reason other than maybe like it's kind of intimidating to sing some of these songs after like um, I don't know, Louis Armstrong has recorded it. So just for example, but yeah, I've definitely noticed that happening. I think a lot of the people who go to these festivals just love music and love to nerd out about it, and jazz is just one of the many things people nerd out about.
So I was going back to what we were talking about before. I was about to ask you all if you ever participate in contests and what you think the spirit of that is for you, because we were talking about like, oh, everybody's welcome, you don't have to know the tune, and then talking about people sort of like working up something to play like their most most impressive tune maybe, and that kind of leads me to a segue about what you were saying, Waverly. Is there do you perceive any evolution in the old time music community musically, or is there an expanding of old time musically, or not? I'll let you all sort of decide who answers that first.
I can talk a little bit about contests. I've gone to several different festivals the past, well, the years when we could go to festivals. And it's interesting because I feel like each festival has sort of a different contest dynamic. There are some festivals where it's pretty much the same handful of people win every year. There are some contests where it's always local people that tend to win there. And then there's contests where it's different every year, or sometimes they'll have different judges, which will also impact maybe they have a preference for a certain style. I also think it's interesting to me because there's also some festivals that don't have contests, which they tend to advertise as like an important thing, which I think is kind of cool, because then people aren't focused on the competition. They're more there to just kind of hang out and be social and play music with other people, and that definitely encourages the community aspect. I do also think though that the contests are usually pretty low key. Like people aren't going to get mad if they don't win. It's mostly just a thing people do for fun. And if you win, great. If you don't win, hey, you got to play in front of people and that's fun. So it kind of depends, I think, on what you're looking for in terms of a festival, and what kind of vibe you're sort of going for.
Yeah, I was a kid who often was drugged to fiddle contests by my dad, and sort of like reluctantly. So I can't say that I enjoy competing, but that is just a personal statement. And I do find a lot of value and importance in the contest aspect of some of the festivals that have them. I mean, a lot of our favorite festivals sort of started out as fiddle conventions, right? And I think that the convention aspect or the contest aspect of having fiddle contest or banjo contest at the center of an event allows basically for people outside of the community to be exposed to it. And I'm certain that contributes to a lot of people being like, okay, I want to play that. I want to do that. So I think it's just another way to sort of, branch our music out and make it more mainstream, if you can call it that. But I also think that, like I don't like to compete in the contests when I go to the festivals, and oftentimes I don't, but sometimes I do, because it's just another element of a contest in which to participate, whether you're like going for gold or not, to just show up and get on the stage and be part of the entertainment for those people who are non-musicians coming in to appreciate the music.
Yeah, I think it's also a good opportunity that I've seen this happen at especially places like Cliff Top and places where they have youth contests. It's a good way to get some exposure, especially if you're one of the winners, your name gets announced, people hear your music. I know several people who have won at certain contests and then they end up getting more attention on their music, which is definitely well deserved. I'm thinking of specifically, Rachel, you know, the Gus and Huck Trish who they won at Cliff Top the last time Cliff Top happened, and now one of them is touring with Jake Blunt, which is super cool. I got to meet them at Augusta, and they're great young musicians, and so I think that's another good thing about contests is it can give people some exposure who might otherwise not have that.
I think Rachel Eddy touched on an interesting point too, which is a lot of these jams are very like musician inclusive, which means like if you are just a listener, you might feel a little bit left out because since we're all circled up playing together, focusing on one another, there's not really much room for the listener to participate. So it might feel easier to enjoy old time music watching a contest, if that makes sense, because often there won't be like seats for the people who want to come walk up and listen. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value to competitions.
Mark Smith said in the chat that he likes to go to contests to hear emerging artists, which kind of echoes what you said, Rachel Dunaway, and I think also brings back that whole element of encouraging young people to get involved and then continue that sort of intergenerational magic of community music making, which I think is one of the neatest parts. So since we're talking about festivals, do the three of you have favorites that you would like to share and tell us about? Do they have, does your favorite have performance stage? Does it have a contest? What's the culture after dark like? Tell us about your favorite.
I could just start with what is probably everybody's favorite, one of everyone's favorite festivals, which is Cliff Top. It's the Appalachian String Band Festival, which is probably the largest gathering almost entirely geared toward old time string band music in the world. And people come from all over the world to camp in the woods on a mountaintop in West Virginia under the clearest sky that I see all year. No lights anywhere near. You just can see the Milky Way and you're just camping in the woods playing music. And there's a contest, and the winners from the previous year's contest perform, and there's a square dance every night, and there's lots of different activities besides just the jamming, but it feels very centered on the jamming. You know, you show up, it's like a family reunion, play some tunes with friends, sit around, drink some coffee. It's like a very relaxed participatory festival that also has the added elements of competition and performance. So that's, it's a favorite to me because it really is it feels like the biggest, that is primarily string band music, not bluegrass music. But I also really appreciate that Mount Airy Fiddlers Convention because it is old time and bluegrass, and it does intermingle, and it's I think that's a really valuable thing to have in a festival too. So that's another favorite, and I also just really deeply appreciate the camps like Augusta and like Blue Ridge Old Time Music Week in Mars Hill and the different various ones that I get to teach at, because it's not like a festival like we're all living in tents. We're like upgraded to dorm rooms on college campuses. But there is sort of there's the learning environment and the cultural exchange. And then at night, it turns into a festival. And so it's kind of the best of both worlds. And I have to say, it's probably of all the many things as a musician that I get to do for my job, my favorite is teaching at those camp environments because it's like a festival without sleeping on the ground. And it also has like the learning element versus the sort of like festival frenzy and contest frenzy and all of that, which I also love and appreciate. But yeah, I like those festivals a lot. And Augusta has been a major influence on my life, as I said before.
So I actually haven't been to Cliff Top still, just because like COVID happened the year I was going to try to go. But anyways, so I went to Hoppin' John this year, which was just so magical. And I'd been before, but I finally got the full experience this year, and it was like all vaccinated and safe. And I got to see Alice Gerard perform with Tatiana, and it was just beautiful. And so well organized and intimate. That was a really special aspect of that one. Because I love Galax, I love Mount Airy, but Hoppin' John just has a really family-oriented vibe, and I really love that. So if you're local to the Triangle or not local, I really recommend that one.
Yeah, I also haven't been able to go to Clifftop yet. I really want to. Yeah, I know, Rachel. I haven't.
I don't understand. I feel like you've been there.
I've been to Augusta every year, but I've not gone to Clifftop. I want to, but then of course COVID happened. But I like Mount Airy a lot. Mount Airy is fun. Like you said, it's sort of a combination of old time and bluegrass. I also agree with Hoppin' John. I went for the first time this summer. And yes, Lindsay Terrell's my festival buddy. Yeah, I really liked Hoppin' John. I liked the location a lot. It was spread out. It wasn't just one like big field area where everyone's stuck in the sun. It was lots of shade. It was smaller. It felt pretty safe. It felt safe because everyone was vaccinated. And I think part of my hesitation to go to somewhere like Clifftop or Galax is just that they're so big. And I'm not always a big fan of huge crowds. So I kind of like it. I like events that are sort of more intimate and are less crazy, crowded, and chaotic, which I think is another reason why I like Augusta, because it's a little more structured. And like Rachel said, it's classes and camp and learning, but then it just turns into a bunch of jamming and fun at night. So it's kind of a different scene.
Yeah, some of those bigger festivals can get really overwhelming really quick. And then like your only place to go hide is your disgusting hot tent. So you have to be in the right mindset to go to Galax for sure. Mount Airy too, a little bit.
Clifftop is like that as well. And I have to say, even though it is my absolute favorite place in all the world to go, and I've been going for 20 years every year, I always cry at least once. It's like, okay, here it comes, the festival cry. I'm either going to get in my nasty tent and cry, or I'll take a walk into the woods or something, but it's happening now. So watch out, because it is a lot of stress, right? It's just a lot of, it's like, is there such thing as too much fun? And it can just be overwhelming to have so much. And there is like a jam session every, 10 feet in many situations. And I find the sensory overload to be very intense as well, and the social overload. And even though I'm happy to see every single person there, after 10 days of it, see, I go pre-camp. I do the 5 days before the festival because it's not as crowded. But then when the festival starts, I am burned out, and it's 7 times more people.
And it brings up such strong emotions. Like, I think that's the one place where I feel like the most myself, the most at home, and the most insecure, like sometimes in the span of like 1 hour. So it's a very intense experience, but I think the festival experience is so important if you do want to be in this community, because it's kind of a trial by fire. Like it really toughens you up in some ways.
I feel like they're never a good place to go if you suffer from FOMO, the fear of missing out. And I think I spent probably like my first 12 years or more of Clifftop just suffering from FOMO. It didn't matter if I was in a jam or not in a jam. I was just like a total maniac about it. And I have found significantly more enjoyment in the last many years since I've just given up on that idea of like, there's got to be something better, or maybe I need to go find something, or I'm not in this jam right now and I feel like I'm missing out, I just have found a way to be more present with that sort of like fear of missing out, and invest more actually in the places I am in the moment that I'm there, rather than worrying about the thing. Because it is like this totally frantic feeling that creates a lot of insecurity and just doesn't actually feel very good.
Yeah.
Y'all can come hang out at my camp, okay? Just come visit. We'll jam.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I've gotten FOMO from missing festivals. Like I see everyone having so much fun at Clifftop, and I'm like, oh, I really should have gone. But also, I've also had the same experience where it's like I feel like there's so much going on that if I do one thing, then I'm going to miss another thing, and I'm going to be sad because I missed this thing. But then I was also doing something fun, and I agree, definitely, like just trying to accept that you're not going to get to everything, and there's always next year, and the year after, and the year after. That you'll eventually get to hang out with everybody. You get to see people you haven't seen in a long time, and there's always something to do. And I've also kind of had to realize that I need to spend some time by myself, even though I'm always like surrounded by other people. Like my friend Lindsay and I went, and we were good festival buddies because we would go and hang out at a jam for a while, and then we'd go and take an hour and just sit in our cars and chill for a while and kind of let ourselves recharge and eat Lunchables. Yeah. I think it's definitely important to kind of know yourself and know your own boundaries and how much you can deal with in terms of socialization and sensory overload and all that, and just kind of be able to pace yourself, especially with a longer festival. Just kind of pace yourself and not try to do everything in one day.
So I am like watching the chatter and seeing how there's a lot of sort of brainstorming happening like behind the scenes of like how could we develop an experience that develops and builds community in the various scenarios that we're already part of. So how can we build community like the kinds of community that meets and convenes and gathers and exists online and offline, even in a brewery or a bookstore or at a festival or at a party. And I'm also hearing this sort of like Matthew put in the chat about having a place where everyone is welcome, where which I think speaks to the point that all of you have been saying about, you really are going to be invited and welcomed, maybe to a detrimental degree if you have a lot of friends and want to sit down with everybody. But since we've had this sort of break in time where everything took a pause, how can we re-enter the world in the old time community, in the folk music community, in all of our communities, and continue to create an invitational space, continue to build community, and maybe like continue to say no thanks to the things that are overwhelming to us, or don't serve us right now.
I think that being able to say no to the things that don't serve a person is just a great skill to have. Not every event is for everybody. And an example that I'll give is, though I love Clifftop very much, I don't like going into bars for jamming purposes. So a lot of people want to go into bars because they can get a beer and play some tunes. And so typically that is a really good place to start a jam or have an open mic, or a place that serves alcohol. Personally, I just don't like being in that environment anymore. So I find that a very challenging place to want to go. However, being as how a lot of jams end up in those venues, one of the ways that a jam perpetuates itself is that it has not a leader, but a team. And I think I've started jams at different various places I've lived in my life, and I've committed myself to being the leader, but I've also asked for a small commitment team to also participate, at least until it gets off the ground and grows into something that can be self-sustainable. And the thing that sometimes can be the most difficult is showing up every week. It's like, oh my God, it's Wednesday night again. I gotta go to the bar. I'm tired. I don't want to do it. But you know what? You have to do it. You just have to go. And as soon as you get there, you're like, even if it's an anxiety sort of inducing thing for me, I'm just like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and drink water and play with my friends. And by the end of it, I'm never sorry that I did it. But I think that commitment to showing up every week or every other week or whatever it is, and having a team is very important in keeping something around long enough to grow, because it doesn't grow in the beginning. It takes months, years sometimes for things to grow. And one other way you can contribute to your jam growing, which is something that happened to me that was very important in my life, is when I was a youth, that community that had been established already for 15 years at that point, that old time community, pulled their monies together and sent me to Augusta for the first time. And I would just wanted to put it out there that if anyone listening to this conversation is an avid supporter in your local music community in any way, shape, or form, helping a young person go to the heartbeat of the community for inspiration and for learning really impact your own community, because they come back with something really important to foster, and also it gives them a bigger view of the community, outside of just your local one. So it's something that I really appreciate being able to do now, is donate money to youth scholarships for these camps, because it really is a kind of the way to help perpetuate the community and the music and the traditions, but also invest in your own community at home.
Yeah, that was so eloquent. You really laid it all out. So I just wanted to kind of follow up on that. I used to run a bluegrass jam the summer before COVID happened. I was very sad because I was like, oh, well, there goes my job. But it was a lot of fun. It was also at a bar, but I think this jam was really nice because the bar had this kind of open space outside. It was like both inside and outside. So you didn't feel like you were at a bar necessarily. You could kind of go into this room that opened out into the yard outside and kind of just have that time to play bluegrass, and people could go get drinks if they wanted to, but you weren't like being overwhelmed by the sound of people talking or anything like that. And so they gave me a budget to hire 2 other musicians, and that kind of touches on your point about needing a team. It would have been impossible for me to do it all alone, especially as a fiddle player, because even though there is like backup you can do, it falls apart really quick without a guitarist or a bassist. So I would always hire like at least either one of those, and maybe like a banjo player or a mandolin player, and that would change every week. And what was my favorite part about the jam was that people from all different skill levels came frequently. Like I had this kid who was just learning how to play mandolin, who's still learning how to chop on the beat, and then some of the best mandolin players in the whole area, and they were coming together. And the one like really experienced friend of mine would stand next to that kid and show him like, this is where you chop. And it was just such a beautiful moment to me, because that perfectly illustrated why I loved this community so much. These people were taking the time to teach this new generation. So yeah, I think a big part of facilitating a jam is, especially for bluegrass, is knowing a lot of songs and being able to fill in the dead air, but also being able to pass the torch and saying, hey, do you have a song or a tune you want to play? And just purposely bringing people in who may seem shy or nervous. But yeah.
Rachel Dunaway, do you want to weigh in? You don't have to.
I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. Like, I think especially what Rachel said about the youth scholarships and things, like one of the main reasons I've been able to go to Augusta so often is because I've applied for the youth for a scholarship many years, and it seems like they don't have as many people as applying as you think. So I've been able to get it almost every year, which has been really helpful for me and has made it a lot more accessible. I think another thing about just jamming is that Augusta especially is like this, but at festivals as well, is like I've seen Rachel do this countless times. Someone will come up and maybe they're more of a beginner. They come up to the jam and they're kind of standing on the side, listening and watching, and they seem kind of hesitant, and you just kind of in between tunes just say like, hey, like come join us, or ask if they want to join. And sometimes they'll say no, they just want to listen. And a lot of the time they'll kind of, they just need this sort of invitation and the encouragement, and they'll hop in and just be able to play along. And it's and that happened to me a lot, especially when I was younger, both in Richmond and in Augusta, that I would see a jam and I'd kind of just hang out and kind of feel it out, and then I'd be invited in, and they would, even if I wasn't quite very good yet, I could still pretty much keep up, at least with chords or maybe just a few notes. But just being able to being welcoming and encouraging people to participate is the best way to get people to play more and get more into it, and then they'll do the same thing for others. And it's kind of just everyone welcomes everyone else, and it encourages people to join the community.
I have one more short thing to add to that, which is a great tactic in many places that I've had the opportunity to lead jams, and that is the 1 hour slow jam before the jam. That is a controlled environment for people who are learning to know that they can show up and they can succeed and they can participate. And when it gets fast, they can try, but if they can't hang yet, they can still leave and come back next week feeling like they're improving and like they're accomplishing something and part of that community. And having that, I mean, the slow jam, nobody loves slow jam more than me. And I think that is amusing that I have that reputation, but I really appreciate being able to get everyone playing no matter what their level are. And that encouragement always lifts them up and they get better.
I want to point out that, well, it's 3:59, so we're getting close to time, but I want to point out that there are just some really great resources and information that people are adding into the chat sort of in response to what our panelists are saying. And there's a lot of links to physical and virtual places you might want to go to get connected with your musical community and with the larger musical community. So it's possible, if you click on the chat window and you just look down there at the bottom next to like the smiley face icon, right where you'd be typing, there's a 3-dot more button. And from there you can save the chat, and then you'll have something saved to your device that's actually a list of all the wonderful things people have offered that we didn't have near enough time to acknowledge. And I also want to say that it sounds to me sort of in the sewing up of everything in this wonderful conversation, that this has really been a conversation about what we value as a community. And I think the fact that Rachel Eddy and Waverly and Rachel Dunaway are here, and the fact that all of the other participants in this meeting, everybody who's here as well, that we're all here today, is sort of an expression of those values of building community, of making welcome, and of having a good time together and finding ways to continue to do that. So I know it's getting close to time, but if anybody has any sort of last minute thing they want to say or ask, just so you know, Rachel Eddy and Rachel Dunaway and Waverly, the Carolina Songbirds, they're all visible on the internet in one way or another. So you can write to SERFA if you're not sure how to connect with them, or you can find them online and come out to Hop and John and Cliff Top and Mount Airy and Galax and all the events and meet up in person. Anything else anybody wants to ask or say last second?
Emily, I'm not sure if you guys have to end this meeting right at the hour, but if you don't, I'm down to hang out and answer any questions anyone might have afterwards. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that I have to go because I have a lesson. But before I did that, I was going to say that I know Rachel Dunaway also teaches, and Waverly, I'm assume that you teach, but I'm just making, yeah. So all three of us do teach variety of fiddle, banjo, guitar, mandolin, old time, and traditional string band stuff. And if you're interested in participating or knowing more about it musically, I'm perfectly happy to help anybody along a musical journey, even for a short while, and you're free to reach out through my website, and I imagine for the others as well.
Awesome point. Yes, take lessons.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
I am going to excuse myself, but thank you so much for having me, and it's very nice to meet you, Waverly. Nice to see you, Rachel, and I hope our paths will cross again. Thanks again, Emily.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Waverly and Rachel. This has been so wonderful. So, and thanks to everybody who's participated. This has been just great. With that, I'm going to say that's the hour. It's been a delight. I can't wait to hang out in person as a big group. But I will put myself on mute, and if anybody has any last minute thing they want to ask, then please do. And otherwise we'll head off as we're ready. Thanks
Well,
again, y'all.
Declare that my late arrival was misunderstanding what time zone this was in. And anyway, sorry I missed it, but thank you for having this group discussion. And I'm a member of Folk Lines, and I'm going to come around again.
Thanks, Lisa. Sorry about the confusion. I'm glad that you were here just for a second.
Ciao.